Have you ever noticed how tired you are? Tired of trying, of insisting, of fighting against everything, against time, against expectations, against others, against yourself. Maybe you don't consciously realize it, but there is a kind of silent weariness that comes precisely from the constant attempt to control life. You pressure yourself all the time to be more productive, stronger, more positive, more stable. You force yourself to make decisions, to maintain relationships, to follow routines that no longer make sense. And the more you try, the more it seems that everything slips through your fingers, like water, like sand, like life itself. This is where a principle comes in that can truly transform the way you live. Wu Wei. An ancient concept from Taoism that Alan Watts translated as acting without forcing. But don't be mistaken. This has nothing to do with passivity or weakness. Wu Wei is, in fact, one of the deepest expressions of wisdom and courage. It is the ability to act in harmony with the natural flow of things, to move with life, not against it. Think of it as a dancer who doesn't struggle with the music, but feels the rhythm and lets themselves be guided, like the surfer who doesn't try to dominate the sea, but learns to flow with the wave. Now stop and ask yourself, how many times a day do you try to force what isn't ready? How many times do you blame yourself for not being able to control what is, by nature, out of your control? How many decisions have you made out of fear of losing something, out of fear of appearing weak, out of fear of not doing enough? The truth is that we have been trained to live against the current of life. Since we were little, we were taught that success comes from effort, insistence, persistence, even when everything in us screams to stop. And so we become anxious, insecure adults, disconnected from our own existence, because we were never taught the art of letting go, of observing, of trusting. Wu Wei is not doing nothing. It is doing with awareness, with lightness, with respect for the timing of things. It is to stop being the exhausted rower fighting against the current, to become the wise sailor who adjusts the sails and navigates with the wind. Alan Watts said that when you stop forcing life, something magical happens. The right doors open, the right paths appear, the right answers emerge. Not because you found them through effort, but because you finally created the necessary space for them to surface. And perhaps, if you are here, listening to this now, it's because you are already tired, because you have realized that forcing doesn't work, and because deep down you already feel that you need another way of living, a way that is quieter, truer, more your own. In the next few minutes, you will understand why Wu Wei is not just a beautiful philosophy. It is a key, a practice, a shift in perspective that can return to your life what you have always sought by trying to control everything. Peace. Not that superficial peace of self-help phrases, but a real peace that arises from alignment with what is, with who you are, with what life has been trying to show you for a long time. So breathe, let your shoulders drop, and be present, because now the journey begins. To understand the true essence of Wu Wei, we need to go beyond beautiful words. We must dive into the roots from which this principle was born, Taoism and Zen. And here, I extend an invitation to you. Forget, for a moment, the way you have been conditioned to understand philosophy, as if it were just a set of ideas to memorize. Tao and Zen are not concepts you understand with your mind. They are realities you feel with your body, with your spirit, with life itself pulsating through you. The Tao, a word that literally means way or path, is not a theory. It is not a manual of rules. The Tao is the description of the invisible flow that moves all things, the growth of trees, the dance of the seasons, birth and death, joy and sorrow, all following a natural intelligence that exists beyond our understanding. Lao Tzu, the Taoist master who first described the Tao, said that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. And why is that? Because every time we try to capture life with words, life has already moved beyond them. The Tao is like the wind. You can feel it, you can let it carry you, but you can never put it in a box. Zen arises from exactly this same perception. When Buddhism met Taoism in ancient China, it gave rise to an even more radical tradition, Zen. Zen does not seek to explain reality. It wants to dismantle everything that prevents you from experiencing it directly. In Zen, there are no doctrines to memorize, nor beliefs to adopt. There is only the practice of being present, completely present, in each breath, in each step, in each gesture. Both Taoism and Zen silently shout the same uncomfortable truth to the human ego. You are not in control, you never were, and your attempt to control life is what distances you from it. What they offer is not an escape, but a reconciliation with what is. A return to the state of trust you once had, perhaps as a child, when you still knew how to play without fear, fall without shame, try without the insane need for success. But this is where many get lost. Because these ancient teachings, coming from cultures so different from our own, seem distant, almost unattainable for the Western mind shaped by reason, logic, and an obsession with results. And it is precisely here that a fundamental figure enters, someone who dedicated his life to building a bridge between these two worlds, Alan Watts. In the next chapter of this journey, we will discover who Alan Watts was and how he translated these invisible wisdoms for us, showing that Tao and Zen are not exotic luxuries, but urgent necessities for those who wish to live truly in this fragmented world. Get ready to meet the man who opened the doors of the East to the West, and who can also open a new door within you. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Imagine a time when concepts like Tao, Zen, Wu Wei, and meditation were viewed by the West with strangeness, as if they were mere exotic curiosities from distant, inaccessible cultures, almost irrelevant to modern life. It was in this scenario that Alan Watts emerged, not as a mere academic, not as a missionary of Eastern philosophy, but as a true alchemist of ideas. Someone capable of translating not only the words, but the soul of these ancestral traditions for an audience that, lost in its own haste and rationality, was already beginning to suffer spiritually without realizing it. Alan Watts was not a scholar cloistered in theories. He was a provocative thinker, an unrelenting questioner of Western certainties. He understood that the greatest obstacle to understanding Tao and Zen was not cultural distance. It was fear. The fear that our Cartesian mind has of losing control, of relinquishing the illusion of absolute dominion over life. Watts did not seek to indoctrinate anyone. He wanted to liberate from the weight of dogmas, the tyranny of goals, the obsession with results. His mission was to reveal that what we incessantly seek, peace, fulfillment, meaning, is not in the heroic effort to control the world, but in the silent courage to allow the world to be as it is. He did this with disarming lightness. There was no heavy tone of authority in his lectures, but rather the fluidity of someone speaking from within experience. Alan Watts did not offer us ready-made answers. He tore apart the questions, ripped off the masks, invited the mind to stumble over its own concepts, so that in the emptiness that arose, something real could finally be felt. He knew that Tao and Zen could not be explained logically, so he told stories. He used simple and powerful metaphors, like the river that flows naturally, the sailor who navigates with the wind, to bring us the wisdom that centuries of Eastern civilizations had cultivated in silence. Watts said that life is like music. The goal is not to reach the end of the song as quickly as possible. It is to dance with it, to feel each note, each beat, without haste, without anxiety. And that is exactly what we forget, that life is not a race. It is a dance. And that Wu Wei, the art of not forcing, is the music that has always been playing, but that many of us have not learned to hear. Alan Watts challenged an entire generation to reconsider their deepest beliefs about what it means to live well. He knew that as long as we continued trying to win at life, we would be inevitably doomed to lose it. His voice echoes to this day because he did not speak only of ancient philosophies. He spoke of the invisible wounds we all carry, of modern loneliness, of existential anxiety, of disconnection from the present. But Watts also knew that merely understanding intellectually is not enough. Knowing about Wu Wei is useless if you continue to paddle against the current in practice. And that is exactly what we will explore next. How the metaphor of the river, so central to Alan Watts's thinking, reveals the root of our suffering, and at the same time, the path to true freedom. Get ready to see your own life in a new light. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a river, a vast, strong river flowing with an ancient force that carries everything in its path: stones, leaves, logs, fish, the very earth. Now imagine a person submerged in this river, desperately trying to swim against the current. Every movement is a struggle. Every attempt to move forward is thwarted. The body grows tired, the muscles stiffen, the mind goes into panic. And the more they fight, the further they drift away from any real possibility of peace. This image is exactly what Alan Watts used to describe human suffering. The metaphor of the river is not just beautiful, it is brutally true. It reveals that the suffering we experience in life is rarely caused by the circumstances themselves. Almost always, suffering arises from our resistance to what is. You lose a job, a relationship comes to an end, a plan goes awry, and instead of accepting reality and seeking to flow with it, you cling to what is already gone, despairing as you try to hold on to what inevitably slips away, like someone trying to hold water in their hands. Watts explained that life, like the river, has its own rhythm, its own intelligence. You don't need to push life. You don't need to control it. You just need to learn to trust its flow. This doesn't mean passively accepting everything that happens. It means acting in harmony with the forces that are beyond your control, just as a surfer learns to read the waves, not to dominate them, but to dance with them. When you fight against reality, you create tension. This tension accumulates in the body, in the mind, in the spirit. You live in a state of war against life, against others, against yourself. The result is predictable: chronic anxiety, frustration, resentment, a sense of helplessness. And the cruelest part is that, on some level, you know you are sinking. But the fear of letting go of control is even greater than the fear of continuing to suffer. The metaphor of the river, however, carries with it a silent promise that there is another way to live, a way that does not require constant struggle, a way in which, by letting go of control, you do not lose yourself, you find yourself. When you stop resisting, you discover that the river of life is not your enemy. It is your ally. It is taking you to places your mind could never plan. But for that, courage is needed. Courage to trust the unknown. Courage to abandon the illusion of security that control offers. And this courage to trust the flow is not just a spiritual whim. It is an urgent necessity in a world that conditions us from an early age to fight, to compete, to dominate. And this is precisely what we will talk about in the next part. How Western culture has created an invisible prison of control and effort, and how this mindset is silently destroying us from within. Prepare to see the true root of your exhaustion, and what needs to change so that you can finally begin to live. You have been trained to believe that everything you want to achieve in life requires relentless effort, extreme sacrifice, absolute control. Since childhood, you have heard phrases like, "Don't give up," "Those who want it, make it happen," "The world belongs to the strong." You grew up believing that if you weren't always fighting, planning, correcting, forcing, something terrible would happen. Perhaps you haven't realized it yet, but this belief has created an invisible prison within you. A prison of constant tension, of fear disguised as ambition, of anxiety painted with the colors of determination. Alan Watts saw this clearly. He understood that the West, by idolizing effort and control, has built a neurotic civilization where people run all the time without knowing where they are going. Where doing has become more important than being. Where every moment of calm is viewed with suspicion, as if inactivity were a threat, a mistake, a weakness to be corrected. We live in societies that venerate excess productivity, excess information, excess goals. Life turns into an endless project to be managed, optimized, maximized. And in this insane quest for control, you drift further and further away from yourself. You become a stranger within your own existence. Have you noticed this? Have you ever felt that sensation of doing everything right, studying, working, producing, and yet carrying an unbearable emptiness as if something essential were missing? It is. And that something is the connection to the natural flow of life, to the Tao, to that which cannot be forced, only lived. But the mind, conditioned by control, does not accept this reality. It fears the unforeseen, the unexpected, the unknown. It wants guarantees. And for that, it builds suffocating routines, rigid goals, strategies that try to eliminate all uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is an essential part of life. Mystery is part of the beauty of being alive. By trying to eliminate the unforeseen, we also eliminate the magic, the surprise, the true spontaneity that makes life worth living. Alan Watts warned, the more we try to control life, the more we separate ourselves from it. It's like trying to capture the fragrance of a flower by closing it in an airtight vault. You preserve the form, but lose the essence. And the result is an artificial, mechanical, weary existence where everything needs to be managed like a factory, including your emotions, your relationships, your own dreams. But there is a way out. There is a way to break these invisible chains, a way to return to living lightly, without having to abdicate responsibility, but freeing yourself from the unnecessary weight of illusory control. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next part. How to practically apply the principle of Wu Wei in the midst of modern life. A world that demands haste, but that deep down desperately longs for presence. Get ready to discover that doing less is not weakness. It is wisdom. And that acting with less effort can, paradoxically, take you much further. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. Talking about Wu Wei in theory may seem enchanting, almost poetic, but how to live Wu Wei in a world that demands haste? How to act in harmony with the flow of life while being bombarded daily by demands, goals, notifications, and unending expectations? That is the real question. And the answer is not simple. It requires courage. It requires, above all, a profound shift in perspective about what it means to act intelligently and what it truly means to live well. Applying Wu Wei in the modern world is not about abandoning your responsibilities, dropping everything, and isolating yourself on a mountain. That is the mistake many make when they hear about non-effort. confusing it with apathy or negligence. Wu Wei is about acting, yes, but from a different place, a place of awareness, of attention, of attunement with what is real and possible in that moment, and not from a frantic attempt to force results that cannot be controlled. In practice, Wu Wei begins with a gesture of humility, recognizing that you do not govern the universe, that there are greater forces than you at work all the time, and that your true power lies not in fighting against them, but in learning to listen to them, to feel them, to dance with them. This requires slowing down, breathing, observing before reacting, stopping to act on impulse, driven by the fear of falling behind, and starting to act in alignment with what truly matters. In daily life, Wu Wei is choosing quality over quantity. It is preferring depth over haste. It is knowing that sometimes the best action is the pause. It is the courage to say no to activities, commitments, obligations that only exist to feed an ego hungry for validation. It is silencing the external noise to hear the internal whisper, the one that has always been there, guiding you, but that you never had the time or courage to listen to. Wu Wei also manifests in the ability to trust the natural cycles of life. There are moments of action and moments of waiting, moments of blooming and moments of retreat. But our culture, obsessed with uninterrupted growth, makes us believe that stopping is failing. Alan Watts reminds us that even winter has its essential role in the cycle of nature, and that sometimes the greatest progress you can make is simply allowing yourself to be where you are, without trying to rush the next chapter. Practicing Wu Wei in the modern world is therefore an act of conscious rebellion. It is swimming against the current of collective anxiety, not to outdo others, but to not lose yourself. It is reversing the logic of scarcity, which says that you are never enough, never have enough time, never do enough, and reconnecting with the logic of natural abundance, that being, simply being, is already complete. But living this way requires vigilance, because the old programming, that of control, haste, excess, will try to pull you back all the time. It will whisper that you are falling behind, that you need to do more, achieve more, prove more. And it is in those moments that you will have the real opportunity to choose, to repeat the pattern of resistance, or to trust the flow of the Tao. This choice, at its core, is the beginning of a radical transformation, and it is exactly about this transformation that we will talk in the next part, the moment when you finally stop forcing, and everything in your life begins to change. Prepare to understand the silent power of conscious surrender, the point where, paradoxically, you become truly free. There comes a moment in life when you need to make a fundamental choice. Either you keep forcing, struggling, insisting on swimming against the current until your body and soul are exhausted, or you finally decide to let go, understanding that life is not a battle to be won, but a mystery to be lived. Alan Watts said that the paradox of true transformation is that it happens not when you force changes, but when you stop resisting what is already trying to emerge within you. When you stop forcing, you create space. Space for life to surprise you. Space for new opportunities to arise, those you could never have planned. Space for you to reconnect with your intuition, with your body, with the silent flow of the Tao that has always been guiding you, even in moments when everything seemed lost. True freedom is not doing whatever you want at any moment. True freedom is being so deeply aligned with life that your actions become natural extensions of what reality demands. It is acting without anxiety, creating without pressure, loving without fear. It is ceasing to be a desperate manager of your own existence to become a conscious participant in the infinite dance of life. And this, of course, requires practice. It requires internal vigilance. It requires the courage to face the old impulses that, in moments of fear, will try to drag you back into the futile struggle against what is. But now, you already know. Now, you have a choice. So, before you leave this video, I want to propose something to you. Stop for a moment and observe. What is the area of your life where you are forcing the most today? Where do you feel you are swimming against the river, struggling against something that perhaps just needs to be accepted, understood, or simply allowed to flow? Comment down below. Share with me and with everyone on this journey where your greatest struggle is today. Sometimes, just recognizing it is already a giant step towards freedom. And if this message resonated with you, if somewhere inside you something awakened, don't stop here. The next video is an important continuation of this journey. It's not just more content, it's an essential piece for you to understand even more deeply how to live with awareness, with lightness, with real presence. Keep watching, because the transformation you seek has already begun, and it deserves to be lived fully. See you there.